And another thing Barack Obama just referenced, of course, was taxes and talking about tax breaks for CEOs versus tax breaks for the middle class. Joining us, of course, Joe Fichera, CEO of Saber Partners. Let's just start on that tax point, because this is one clear delineation right now between the Democrats in the race and the Republican, because John McCain wants to, make the Bush tax cuts permanent. Both Barack and Hillary are saying that most of them should expire, and they are going to take it back to where it was in the 90s.
It's always easier to talk about tax cuts rather than raising taxes, but a bill is coming due, and both candidates have to address the fact that of the entitlement programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and the demographics of the changing population going forward, and the fact we're all living longer and what that's going to do to the federal budget going forward. Money's going to have to come from somewhere. We can't just keep talking about tax cuts and just talking about taxes only upon people $250,000 and above. There's probably going to have to be a restructuring of the system, and if we could only, if either candidate can bring back a kind of consensus that we had in 1986, where we actually did have tax reform, we eliminated a lot of loopholes, we raised the capital gains tax to be taxed just on ordinary income, didn't have a disastrous effect on the economy. Economy grew the next quarters, and that kind of, unfortunately, probably makes me too much of an idealistic Wall Street person, because we're not probably going to get that consensus. We're probably going to get what we're seeing right now, a hodgepodge of tax cuts here, other types of things of trying to pursue policies through the tax code rather than biting the bullet and getting the entire house in order and dealing with the relative cost of health care, because that's going to kill us in just 5 to 10 years. Unfortunately, as a Democrat, we've always gotten sort of labeled as the tax and spend aspect of it, and that you always can just need to tax and continue on. Notion of trying to have fairer taxes and maybe even look at alternatives such as a value-added tax, as Europeans do, as opposed to income taxes that we have. And to know that we're just not going to be able to, we're going to need to still stimulate growth. Wall Street, whatever the negatives is good to beat up on us in terms of politics, we still can produce a lot of growth and wealth for the entire economy, because there needs to be investment. And there needs to be that kind of growth that creates wealth. And wealth will create additional revenues through that. You don't want the government to be a drag on the system. But you're not going to be able to do it just all by taxing, or the fairy tale of all by growth, of the Laffer curve, and just say, oh, if we cut it more, then we'll grow our way out. It's not one. It's going to be a balance of those approaches. And all of the candidates have to do it. Unfortunately, Senator McCain is more sort of saying, I'm going to read Alan Greenspan's book and figure out what to do. But at least the Democrats have an approach. Okay. There's differences, but we didn't know it's going to have to be a balance. I
want to raise something with you, because on the wires, Tom Honig, who's the head of the Kansas City Fed, is saying that the Fed is going to have to make some choices that will be desperately unpopular. Inflation may become embedded in the economy. Is the Federal Reserve going to be under attack from the next administration if they start fighting inflation at a time when the middle class feels squeezed and there's a war in Iraq and the budget deficit's a problem?
I would hope everyone would support the independence of the Fed, and so we don't become a banana-ripe Republican thinking that the monetary system is going to pursue some political gain. I think the Fed has done a very good job. We might have asked them to act a little bit sooner and some different types of things, but we have Humphrey Hawkins. What is it? They have two objectives, both growth and inflation. And if we don't have inflation under control, I think Paul Volcker proved that in the 70s, we are going to really have a problem. So I think hopefully Americans will not have had a short-term memory loss to realize what runaway inflation would do to you, and that is what's necessary.